All right, I am live right now, and I don't know if anyone's going to be here for some time, uh, but I'm watching a live video as I do this. I'm watching Sober James right here, and he does a lot of talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I like Sober James. He's doing his he's doing his thing and I'm doing my thing. This is definitely a live stream talking about sobriety. It's in the title, and I want to start doing more of these. I'm smoking a cigarette right here. This is not a joint, but I do talk openly about cannabis use and cannabis addiction, and that I'm addicted to cannabis, but that I still smoke it, and that's not a problem. The problem is when people don't admit that they're addicted to cannabis. I got this chat room here. So feel free to like ask some questions if you want. This is my first live stream, but I write a daily blog at asmr.community. That's the name of the website. Every day at 8 in the morning um, Eastern Time and 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, there's a new blog post live where I select an ASMR video and then I write a little bit about the video. I'm here in Florida, so I wake up at 5 in the morning, uh, drink some coffee, prepare some coffee, and then I write the article and it's live by 8. I'm trying to get way better about that. So they're exactly live at 8. But if I feel that I need to write more for the day, sometimes it might be 5 or 15 minutes late. And a lot of people have reached out to me, and I seem to get really good reactions when I talk about like cannabis. We call it cannabis, weed, marijuana. It's a lot of different things. I always call it cannabis. That seems to be the word that fits best for me. And I smoke it. And I haven't drank alcohol in over 2 years. July 4th, 2018 was the last, no, June 22nd, 2018 was the last drink I had. July 4th, 2018 was the first time I turned down alcohol for the rest of my life. And so the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the only step I know, we admit we are powerless over alcohol. That's not even the whole thing. There's more to it, but I don't know the whole phrase. I don't know all 12 of the steps. I don't even know the first one. I've probably been to 10 or 20 AA meetings, but I haven't been to an AA meeting since I got sober. I've never gone to one AA meeting since I got sober. Um, and I haven't had any relapses since July 4th, 2018. I didn't smoke cigarettes for a long time. I smoked cigarettes until September of 2017, and then I quit, but I hadn't bought a pack of cigarettes for an entire year before that. I was just bumming cigarettes off my girlfriend, which is not like ideal, but I broke my addiction to buying cigarettes. Like it was like I would give her the money to go in and buy a pack of cigarettes. So by the time I quit, which was like it happened slowly. It was like I'd wake up in the morning and I'd have a cigarette. I was living in Seattle. Oh, and then I'd yawn, and I was like, "Man, something's wrong." I wake up, I have a cigarette, and then as soon I wait, then I'd start waiting. All right, I'm gonna wait as long as I can, and it'd be like noon. I wake up. Even back then, I was waking up at like 6 in the morning, maybe, and didn't have a cigarette till noon. But as soon as I had one, the instant I had a cigarette, I would start yawning, and that's not good. When you're yawning, it means your brain doesn't have enough oxygen. So I'm thinking to myself, it kind of happened gradually. And I was living in Seattle where cannabis was legal, so I was smoking cannabis. That's like a big, a big thing that I talk about, and I think I'm about to rock the addiction recovery world because I'm gonna start going. I'm not gonna go to AA meetings and talk about this because one of the reasons I stopped going to AA was because I would like show up stoned and I felt bad about it. Like these people were clearly having a way harder time than me. And the reason was because I was stoned. Um, and I'm not smoking weed right now. I haven't smoked weed in a couple days. And I'm not going to lie, it's just because I don't have any money. I definitely have enough money to buy alcohol. and I have enough money to buy cannabis, but you got to make some choices. You know, it's one of the reasons I haven't had a cigarette in like 10 days. And I wasn't even like fiending for a cigarette. I just, it's boredom. And boredom was the reason I started drinking in the first place. And that's something that I'm trying to find a new way to elaborate on because I was bored, so I became an alcoholic, is not the kind of thing that helps anybody. Um, I think it's because I wasn't, stimulated enough. Like now that I understand how my brain works, I think to myself, okay, I don't have any kids, but if I ever have kids, they're very likely to end up falling into the same problems that I fell into if I don't keep them just busy. And there's a lot more to it than that. But looking back on it, it's just like, both of my parents kind of just like chill out. Neither of my parents are alcoholics or addicts. Um, my dad like doesn't drink, period. But his father was an alcoholic. My father's adopted. And the only surefire way that you can predict if you're going to have an addiction problem is to look at your parents. If your parents have an addiction problem, there is a chance that you can have one. That's the only way that you can predict. So my father's father was an alcoholic, but my father was adopted. So that's like not in my blood, but it obviously is because I am an alcoholic. I had a huge problem with alcohol. These days when I go through a struggle, like I've really been struggling. I moved out of San Francisco, saved up some money in San Francisco, left San Francisco, came to my dad's house to like start a business, and then the pandemic hit. And the pandemic hasn't really affected me. Hold on. I'm like sending this. I'm not texting. I'm gonna try and get the people watching the Sober James channel to come over here. Uh, I was watching this guy for a while. Sorry about this. First live stream, so I do want to bring in people. One thing that I've realized I'm not focusing on enough is actually trying to help people get sober. Like I write my daily blog, but almost everybody that talks to me about it isn't somebody with a problem. There are a lot of ASM artists, and some of them might have problems, and there's not like a problem with ASM artists watching my channel, but I'm starting to think like, okay, it's hard to. One thing I wrote recently is that I don't, although I do help people get sober, I'm helping other people help other people get sober. Like if your friend or your brother or your parent has an alcohol problem or a drug problem, or even like a problem where they consume too much sugar, I think that it's a lot easier for somebody who's closer to that person to help them out. Like you can recommend to this person in your life that they come read my blog. You can recommend to them that they watch my channel and listen to my stuff. But if you're reading what I'm writing, a lot of what I implement might a lot of what I say might be better implemented in a more intimate setting. You can really sit down. They're going to listen to you. If you're like, this person, they're going to listen to you more than they're going to listen to me. Um, because that's just what I believe. I haven't really, I haven't gotten anybody sober yet. There are people that I know who cite me as like, I stopped drinking, woo woo, but nobody that I think like straight had a problem, started reading my blog, and then they're like, oh, this blog changed my life. Like that hasn't happened to me yet. But with the information that I'm putting out there, that's not a bad goal to have. That seems like an achievable goal. I'm all about setting achievable goals. That's like I have 4 steps. I wrote down 4 steps because like everybody's used to this 12-step program. Um, so I have my 4 steps. I guess I should know them by heart. They are in front of me, or they're not in front of me. They're over on this other screen here. And I wrote them down at this kava bar down here in Florida. Step 1, sobriety is a choice, and it's up to me to make the right choice. Step 2, not everybody will be able to achieve sobriety, but that knowledge does not prevent my success regarding sobriety. Step 3, the urge to imbibe substances that I know will prevent my success is finite. Sometimes the urge will exist, sometimes the urge will not exist. Step 4, sobriety is not the same for everyone. Success is. So when you're talking to this person who's really close to you, it's going to be easier for you to talk to them and be like, look, this is your choice. Sobriety is a choice. You got to make the right choice. They feel no obligation. Like when you're going to AA meetings, and again, only been to like 20 AA meetings, but when you're a recovered alcoholic, you pretty much know about AA. It's what there is. There's like this is the I don't have any problems with AA. I recommend to people that they should not only read my blog, but also go to the meetings. Like there's nothing wrong with going to a meeting, but it definitely wasn't enough for me. Kind of one of the problems is like if you get arrested for a DUI, the court of law in America forces you to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And by contrast, can you imagine if somebody got arrested in America for a DUI and they were forced by a court of law to read my blog? That sounds so insane, but to me, that's the equivalent of AA. Like AA, it's got to be unsolicited. Sobriety has got to be unsolicited. You cannot force someone to be sober. I tell this story all the time. There was this guy I knew, his name was Connor. I say was. His name was Connor. And he went to prison, I'm pretty sure, for like doing heroin, not selling heroin. I think he went to jail. He went to prison for doing heroin. Like he got caught with some heroin. I think he got arrested the same way he died. He shot up heroin and like fell asleep in a public bathroom, and they arrested him, brought him to prison. 2 years later, he got out of prison and he overdosed. The day after he got out of prison, he died. So the system absolutely failed him. And when you try and force someone to be sober, like people, so I heard once that when you start consuming alcohol or drugs, you stay in that same state from when you start. So you start drinking at, 21, and you're drinking until you're 31. In your head, you're a 21-year-old. Now that's a really vague and bold statement, but this is something I heard. And so when you're younger, you have angst. We'll call it the teenage angst, where you like just do stuff to piss your parents off. So I think there is probably a large handful of people, way too many people, who have ended up probably dying of overdoses simply out of like spite, like, oh, they told me I can't do this, so I'm doing it. Which sounds ridiculous, but when you're in prison for 2 years and then you get out and you overdose the day after, not only do I think the system failed you, but maybe you're like pissed off at the system, and that's not a good reason to die. There's no good reason to die, but yeah. So getting arrested for a DUI and then they force you to go to AA, don't necessarily know if that helps people as much as it could. And all of this leads me to just like talk more openly about the fact that, I like smoke cannabis, and that was something nurses always told me. They're like, I would go check myself in to like a detox program. There was a hospital by my house. I went to that detox program maybe 5 times. Went in there, checked myself in, and the nurses would tell me, they'd be like, you're never going to be able to quit drinking unless you stop smoking weed. And I would always be like, what the fuck? Like, you can't tell me that, because I'm telling you, I'm not going to stop smoking weed. Like, I smoked weed before I drank. I smoked weed for like 6 months when I was 14 because I had this girlfriend, but it was like really intense. It was always like I always got too high. And then when I was 19, I bought a bag of weed and I smoked it until it was gone. And then I bought another one and just kept going and going and going. So this is where I think people get the misconception of a gateway drug. If cannabis was legal where I was, I think I would have had a way better shot of not becoming an addict and alcoholic, because it's just, I don't know. You try these, the fact that drugs are illegal, everything's got to be unsolicited. Like, you can't force people to make decisions. Right now, we're experiencing this with the masks in the United States. They're talking about implementing a federal mandate. I wear a mask. When I go into public, I wear a mask. Um, there's like a large gathering that I attend on the regular, and not a lot of people there wear masks. Although in the last couple of weeks, they've started to wear masks more. I'm in Florida, so there's like kind of an outbreak happening. But things that are unsolicited are just better. When people can gain sobriety uh, on their own accord, that's how it's going to work. There was this program. It was an outpatient rehab program that I checked myself into. Again, I'm smoking a cigarette. I'm not smoking a joint. I haven't had a cigarette in like 10 days, but sometimes I'd just be sitting here in the middle of the day, just like so stressed, thinking like, I just don't know how to continue. Um, but I have to, you just keep going. So having a cigarette once in a while. The problem is that once I smoke one, I just keep smoking them. Like, I'm going to get back to my story about the inpatient rehab. Um, you know, very rarely in my life have I enjoyed a cigarette, and I'm convinced that other people don't enjoy them. Like, my mom chain smokes cigarettes, and as I get older, I get to know my parents more. But I'm convinced folks be having cigarettes and they don't like them because, like, almost never in my life have I had a cigarette and at the end of it being like, oh, I'm really glad I did that, satisfied. It's always just like you think it's going to hit the spot, but it doesn't. But it does hit the spot when it's like I've been stressed out for 2 hours and then I have a cigarette. Like, I'm genuinely surprised at how much it changes my mood. It is an absolute 100% substitute for cannabis. There's no question about that. If I had cannabis, cigarettes, but it's a totally different vibe. Like, I started doing this a couple months ago, smoking cigarettes, because I was like, you live once and then you die. You got to do what makes you happy. And this is like, when I talk about sobriety, I tell people, like, you can go have a drink, but don't. I can go have a drink anytime I want. I'm over 21. It's a free country. They sell it at all the stores. And if you got money to buy alcohol, you can just go buy alcohol. So you have to make that choice not to. I don't want to go have a drink. That's the end of the story. Like, that's why I don't go have a drink. It's not because I'm like going to meetings and being constantly reminded. It's not because it's because of traumatic events. This is the thing I talk about with AA. Like, I think a lot of people get sober through AA because they have a traumatic event happen to them, and like, they would have gotten sober anyway. Like, if you spend 5 years in prison and get out and, excuse me, you're like, I got to get sober, you're going to do it. You have to want it. And AA is there for those people. If you are an alcoholic, you've heard of AA, I'm sure of it. And so you've known about this program for 5, 7, 10, 17 years. When that thing finally happens to you where it's like, you either got to get sober or you're going to die, AA is there to take you in. But for people who want to get sober before that crazy traumatic event, they just got to want it. And so when you totally try and cut yourself off from other things that make you happy, like smoking cigarettes doesn't necessarily affect the people around me. Like, when I would get drunk, I would just be outlandish and people didn't want to be around me. I would be, at the end of my drinking days, I would be like crazy rude to people and mean. Uh, One time I yelled out a window. We were going through a drive-through, and I don't remember this. I was blacked out, and I told the lady working at the McDonald's drive-through that she was so ugly she should never have kids. And why I would say anything like that is like, those are the kind of things that make me want to stop drinking. Those are my traumatic events. I'm definitely an asshole. But I don't want to be. And that's an important thing. That's like an important factor. So it's got to be unsolicited. Like the people who are going to find sobriety the best and enjoy it. It's one thing to have quit drinking. It's another thing to have quit drinking and moved on from it. Those are two things. Like I always thought people who attend AA, like you drink for 10 or 20 years and then you attend AA for 20 or 30 years, like you're addicted to going to AA, which is not a problem. But I think it's worth having open conversations about. There's only one person in here. I have no idea who it is. I don't even know how to look or anything like that. But all right, let's go back to the inpatient program. So I checked myself into an inpatient program or an outpatient program. So like I'd go to this detox thing up at the hospital and they're like, look, if you want to try something more, serious than just going to a meeting, because that's what they recommend. It's just like you got to go to AA meetings. You got to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And like even when I tuned into Sober James, his live stream's over. I'm only slightly disappointed that none of his folks came over here, unless they did. 90 meetings in 90 days. Oh, and all people do at AA is like talk about times that they used to get fucked up. That's like for sure. If you go to an AA, and that's another thing. And I even was like, am I crazy or is that what goes on at those meetings? But then I started like seeing videos and talking to other people. They're like, I don't want to go to an NA meeting. And I'm thinking of this one guy specifically. He's like, went to Narcotics Anonymous. He's like, and I'd go there and everyone's talking about getting high. And there's even people there trying to sell drugs. Like you hear these stories if you talk to people who have been in halfway houses and stuff. Like halfway houses can be bad places. There's so many people who have bought drugs at halfway houses. It makes me wonder. I've never been in a halfway house, but it makes me wonder, like, I don't know. There's something is not right with all that. So I checked myself in to this outpatient program, and there was 12 people there, and I was the only person that checked in voluntarily, which is disheartening. It makes me wonder, can I really help other people get sober when out of 12 people, I'm the only one who's making these choices to just like really try? You got to try. Like there's going to be a tough time ahead of you if you're getting sober, but for me, it was like listening to these nurses and listening.